just a couple weeks ago when Brother Greg was when we were talking about the kind of the types of sermons that you'll find us preaching in particular, and that you can kind of categorize each one. I think we found that Brother Greg was talking about the exact same thing with respect to. Well, that's a good question. Does anybody remember the kind of the classifications for sermons? You can kind of put them in a particular category. There's kind of like two majors. Does anybody remember that? It's expositional, and anybody remember the other one?
Can you ask the question again?
The types of sermons, if you hear a sermon, you can usually put it in a category, one of a couple or three. There's topical. You remember what the other one is? The other major one? The one where you go verse by verse.
Was it expositional?
Expositional, right? Or it can be a combination of. Well, but I was using that point actually just to kind of always call that the harmony of the gospel, not necessarily the harmony of the gospels, which is particularly talking about how the Matthew, Mark, and the other gospels, Luke and John, how they seamlessly tell the story of Christ. But how, in that case, myself, Brother Greg, Brother Trent, how we, again, also seamlessly, in this case, we're talking about justification. And I like these kinds of shows where, I think I know Brother Greg does too, where there's evidence left. And then, of course, there's a team of people that come out and they begin to collect the evidence to solve the crime. What kind of team would you say those people are?
They called what's the name? It's something forensic or something like that.
It's a forensic term. What's a forensic term? Justification. So justification is a forensic term. It's a term, and it means opposed to condemnation. So it's a term where, again, it's dealing with evidence and proving a thing, or, of course, disproving a thing. The term justification, if it were a courtroom, who is the person who, and this is interesting, in the courtroom, who brings the charge against the defendant?
The prosecutor.
The prosecutor, right? Well, in even simpler terms, let's not even think so serious. You have what did anybody say it? You have think.
The plaintiff and the defendant.
There we go. I was gonna say, think the people's court. You know how you get caught up in daytime television, and well, you turn on one of those court shows, and you just keep turning because you will get caught up. There's the plaintiff. Who would be, in the case of our sins and the charges that have been laid against us, who would be the plaintiff? Who lays the charge?
Satan does. Satan charges us with everything. But who would be the plaintiff is what you're saying?
Yeah, maybe not quite.
But you're right. It doesn't fit for me exactly, but I'll say we are. Or
well,
I am.
No, we're not. We're not the ones saying, "Oh, we need to be held accountable
Oh, no,
for
no.
our
No.
behavior." Who does that?
God.
God does.
Oh, you're talking about that. Okay, thank you.
Exactly. Well, God is the one. It's his righteousness. It's who he is. It's his character that he cannot change. What did God institute in the Old Testament in particular to inform man that he would be unable to meet this standard, that he's actually guilty of the charges laid against him?
The Ten Commandments?
law.
That's the part of it, absolutely part of it. The greater term, of course, is the law. That Trent just said, it's the law. So God in the Old Testament, what do we know about the law? Like, just that's a big topic as well. If you want to package the law, I don't know anything about Old and New Testament. I don't know about your Christianity. I kind of know a few things that I've heard of folks say, but I'm asking you, Christians, what is this law? Why did God institute this law?
To show us our sin, to know that that we need to call on him, to show us how sinful we are because we couldn't keep it.
There we go. That's anybody else?
Yeah, well, and to show that, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we couldn't keep it, to show the level of perfection that we weren't able to sustain anyway.
Absolutely. And that was, if you would, the plaintiff's document. If you go before the grand jury, what do they come up with?
If there's enough evidence to charge you.
Exactly, right? So turn to 1 John 3 and 4. 1 John 3 and 4. If anybody gets it, go ahead and read it. I got it right here, but want to make sure and get you guys talking. We don't have a lot of folks, but we can have a whole lot of fun with this. Let's go. 1 John, 3rd chapter, 4th verse. What does it say?
Whoever commits sin also commits lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness.
I'm muted. I read the whole thing. I'm muted.
Trent, what translation were you reading from?
I think I have the New King James.
Okay, mom. Yeah, that's my mom. Go ahead and read it as well.
Mine says, whoever commits sin also commits lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. So I think I have the same as Trent.
Exactly. I think I have it in ASB here. Whosoever committed sin transgresseth. No, that's probably King James. That's good old King James with the essence. Also, sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is transgression of the law. Sin is the document that God had set in place, the law, at least in the Old Testament. Sin is violating that standard. Again, that's the Old Testament version. But the complete law, of course, that he wrote in our hearts, the sin that the entire document that is the gospel that sets the standard of behavior.
Go back to that question you asked earlier. I didn't understand what you said. You said, why did God bring the law? I didn't have an answer, but I didn't hear what you said.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? You said why?
I think you guys did answer it. You guys did it.
Huh?
No, I said I think you did answer it.
I said because to show us our sin, but I didn't know that you sanctified that one or said something else. I thought you said something else. It was for something else.
No, not at all. I said that's certainly correct. The law was instituted so that God's people in particular, then would be well aware that they couldn't meet the standard.
Right. Okay.
And that they needed somebody to stand in their stead. So go to James 2, 9, and 10. because we think I was as studying this subject for quite some time. I think I don't know if I said it last week. If I didn't, I certainly intended to. What is it? Yeah, I don't want to answer the question. I think I want to ask the question. What makes us guilty? I think we did answer it, as a matter of fact, but I want to make sure you grasp it. What makes us guilty?
Our Adamic
And
sin,
what's that?
our sin that we inherited from Adam.
There we go. You didn't even let me ask the second question, because that's the
Oh,
whole
I'm
answer. Because when we, of course, when you're a younger Christian, you hear a lot about that little bitty word, big doctrine, big term, sin, S-I-N. And you may come away, at least initially, when you're beginning to learn some of the basics, that it is our sin, of course, that makes us guilty. It is our sin that transgresseth, as it says there. Also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. You may come away thinking that it is your personal sins.
Mm-hmm.
You may come away thinking that, oh my goodness, because yeah, I used to lie a lot. Or yeah, because I was I fornicated, or because yeah, I had a pretty offensive tone and disposition and angry, and I was living out of wedlock. I mean, there could be, you can go down the line if you want to count up our sins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody would think about that? Anybody? If you, that's why the the Catholic thing. When you go confess them in the booth, it's like, that's unending. How can you ever have security? Because there's always going to be some sin you need to account for.
Amen.
I had a little Bible study at work with a couple of friends. I mean, you just kind of walk past a desk or two. I'm talking, there's a girl named Shakita. There's a friend, strong Christian brother who could identify, he says he's Catholic, right? But I tell Ernesto all the time, I said, brother, you keep saying Catholic, now you're a Christian.
But there are some. There are some.
Oh, absolutely. No, when he states his belief, and he'll send me, he get daily. He sends me, a word from, I forget, one of the old standard preachers. Goodness gracious, I can't recall it. Anyway, so we're saying we're having we end up, because we'll grab a Bible off of the desk and everything, and we'll talk about subjects such as these. And again, this is such a good lesson, because we end up talking about such this sin. Like, okay, what makes me guilty? And you may think it's your personal sin, but just like Sister Nelson said, it's the sin that you inherited. It's because that you are Adam's seed. And if you remember, does anybody remember what we called it when you think of Adam's seed?
Adamic.
That's the Adamic, that's our nature. Right.
Seminal representation.
Seminal representation, absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
Because, and again, that literally says Adam's seed. So James, 2nd chapter, verses 9 and 10. James, 2nd chapter, verses 9 and 10. Somebody gets it? Go ahead and read it.
For whoever shall keep the whole law and yet stumble in one point, he is guilty of
9.
all.
Start at 9.
Oh, start at 9.
Yes.
But if you show partiality, you commit sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. 10 says, for whoever shall keep the whole law and yet stumble in one point, he is guilty of all.
That's pretty deep, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, wait a minute. I didn't violate the whole thing.
Mm.
But he says, how many times can you can go through scripture and Christ said, you've heard that it was said, but then he says, but I tell you this.
Mm-hmm.
He says, you thought the standard was here and you thought you were close to meeting the standard, but the bar is nowhere near where you think it is. The standard is way up here. That's what this James text basically says. But if you have respect to persons, you commit sin. That means if you esteem one above the other and are convinced of the law as transgressors. For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, that means he is guilty of all. I often use this with the parolees because they'll get upset, for their first violation. And I say, you know what happens when I drive perfect, don't get a ticket for 20 years, 30 years even.
Mm.
And if I go through a stop sign, let's say I don't even go through it. Anybody know what a California roll is?
Oh, yeah.
Cherie will tell you that I get my California roll on.
No.
Don't talk to my wife about that, though. She will tell you that, you didn't stop at that stop sign. Now, if for 30 years and I don't get a ticket and I roll through that light and law enforcement sees me, what is very likely to happen? I'm going to get a ticket because I've transgressed the law, because I've violated it, because it's the standard. And even if you meet it for a period of time and violate it once, then you're in violation of the law. That's what James 2:9 and 10 kind of is saying in that. It's like, no, if you violated it, you violated it. It doesn't matter which one. And in this case, it says you're guilty of violating, doesn't go into each particular law, but you are guilty of violating the standard of, the righteousness of, the wholeness of, the holiness of the law. It says, well, I have here, and again, going back to a couple friends at work, and we were discussing the same about how Christ, again, set that standard. And just to establish with them that the standard was far more often than we think it is. And that's why good study on the topic of sin and this one, justification, is necessary. We identified the plaintiff. Who's the defendant in the courtroom?
Human race.
The human race. Anybody else? That's the answer. Anybody else you want to put it in? I got man here.
Me.
Does that count? Same thing, right?
No, I would say me.
Mankind.
See, that's what I'm looking for, right?
Yeah.
See, Trent's a cop, Trent's a cop, and he don't violate the law.
I am the law.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So he's retired now. So all he has to do is flash his badge, right? And he's got carte blanche.
Not anymore.
Did you gave it back willingly?
No, they don't care anymore.
Right? So somebody said mankind. Somebody said man. What did you say, Greg?
The human race.
Somebody said the human race. I heard Greg. Greg must be looking around the
think
kitchen
that's what he
cupboards
said.
right now.
Yeah.
No, I
What'd you
said
say?
me. I said
There we
me.
go. I thought I heard it. Greg said me.
Mm.
And that's the answer, isn't it?
Yeah, because we
Because-
can't be concerned about everyone else. Our concern
True.
is
I
what
mean, if we're
we've
talking
done.
about big terms, of course, and doctrinal statements on such, then we can talk about mankind and human race. But the answer really is, who's the defendant?
Me.
I'm the defendant. And God is the plaintiff. And can you imagine? Like, you know, you hear about these great attorneys, right? Johnny Cochran. Who's oh, I was watching one the other day from the old TV shows, Who are the attorneys that we used to watch?
Perry Mason
Perry Mason,
and
right?
Matlock.
Right? Andy Griffith. And he was a cop then, right?
Yeah.
So is that your next career, Trent? Going into the courtroom, gonna wear a cheap Wright leisure suit, go track him down. Well, God is the plaintiff. The defendant is mankind. Nope. The defendant is, yes, it is, but the defendant is me. Who's the judge? Anybody?
God.
God, right? Because he's the one that instituted this law. God is sitting up there on the dais. He is the final word on the matter, and he will give his final disposition. What kind, Trent? Couple different kinds of trials. What are they?
Court trial and jury trial.
The what trial?
Court trial and the jury trial.
Right. In the court trial, what's another name for that? I ain't never talked to Trent about this, but there's a jury trial, right? What's the other one? A court trial. Who's the standard, or who makes the decision? Who's the deciding party in the court trial?
The judge.
The judge. Saints, in this case, we ain't talking about a jury trial.
Here come the judge.
What's that?
Here come the judge.
Here come the judge, exactly, right? So I'm the defendant. God is the judge. This is not a jury trial. Can you imagine all these attorneys that we've mentioned, and they're be the prosecuting or defense attorneys that come from our television view. Can you imagine if the creator of the universe, who is both the plaintiff, because remember we said God is the one bringing the charge, right?
Right.
And he is also the judge?
Yeah.
How in the world do we get out of this one?
We don't have a chance.
We don't have a chance at all.
I have a chance. I have an advocate.
You got counsel, right?
I have counsel.
Exactly. Who is the defendant's counsel?
My Lord Jesus Christ.
There we go. Oh my goodness. You are dead to rights, right?
Yeah.
You are, what defense without Christ's counsel? What defense do you have? Like before you came to Christ, here we go. Because how long have we been guilty? Since when? Seminal representation. So if the defendant is me, what day did I become guilty?
The day when Adam sinned.
The date when Adam sinned. I guess that is the correct answer. Absolutely. That's the date when I became guilty. I was looking for somebody to say, oh, when you were born. But the date when Adam sinned, that means I've been guilty since before I was born. You guys keep answering the questions too correctly. So if I'm guilty before I was born, God is the plaintiff. God is the judge. This is not a jury trial. I am, again, what you call dead to rights. There's a smoking gun. All the evidence is laid out, but I have counsel. So what is Christ's argument in our defense? What topic are we talking about? I'm sorry, what did you say, Mom?
I thought I heard you say, what is our defense?
Yes, what is our defense?
The blood.
We gotta come up with a defense, right? We can say that, you know what, I was, by reason of insanity, right? Is that gonna work?
No.
No. right? Because you can't fool God, right? He says, I'm not mocked. And, you know, I created you, so I know your mind, and I know when you did, what you did, why you did it.
So I said the blood, because you can't get from under anything without the
And
blood.
see,
Jesus'
and
death.
that's absolutely perfect, because what that does for me is Trent may say it a little bit differently because of his background. I know Greg's background. He gonna say stuff a little bit differently for sure, right?
Yes,
You know,
sir.
when
I
it
would
comes to,
say,
well,
I
hold
would
on, no, just when it comes to your personal testimony. I'm just saying
Okay.
it's not gonna sound like the way somebody else says it. But when we're explaining and witnessing, and when our life is a witness, then it's going to be big and bright and vibrant. Nami started with the blood. What did you say, Greg? Go ahead.
I would say at sentencing, that's where the crucial part is. Because I
Good.
already been found guilty. So at sentencing, he's going to pronounce the judgment, and that's when my advocate will step in and say that he would take on and pay any and all physical, spiritual, monetary costs that is due me, or should I say that's due God.
Absolutely, right? Because of his righteousness, then you got to pay a penance. What is that?
Life for every
Exactly,
sin,
right?
everyone who sin must die.
Death and separation for how long?
Eternity.
Same
Yeah,
sentence
forever.
for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Same sentence. What would you say about the blood, Mom? How would you put it with the blood?
I would say the blood covers us. So it protects us from all of that.
It protects us because, again, let's put it all together. Like Nam said, the blood. Greg said, because I'm guilty. Well, the blood protects me because I'm what? Guilty.
Guilty.
Right. It was supposed to be whose blood?
Mine.
It should
Mine.
be mine. Yeah.
Now, my blood can't keep me from being dead. My blood was just supposed to be spilled and shed and I die. Not just a physical death, but a spiritual death for all eternity, separated from God. Remember, this is not a jury trial. So Greg again beat me to the punch. I think Nami did it and Trent did it. Now Greg's taking his turn. So the final verdict has already been pronounced.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
It is guilty. Because if God is bringing the charge and he is the judge, and this is not a jury trial, if we don't have Christ as our advocate, because that is the defendant's counsel. We've identified all these other players in the courtroom. I got counsel. Like, who's my attorney? Wait a minute. I have the son of the judge and the plaintiff who's in my corner. And he says, I covered that with my blood. He says, oh, they're guilty. He's definitely guilty. But I'm going to stand in their stead. So what happens to the charges?
They still get carried out.
Drop the car charges.
Charges is never dropped.
They're
Well, he dropped them
satisfying.
when they covered them with the blood.
Right.
It's semantics that we're playing with for sure. So if we say charges dismissed, not quite, because in the interest of justice, his righteousness still has to be satisfied. So Trent, what do they say? They say, which one don't you want to hear? If the judge says he dismisses the charges, I've always been confused a little bit about this. The charges are dismissed without prejudice. That means that they can be refiled, correct?
Right, correct.
Now, if he dismisses them with prejudice, then they're done.
They're done.
And they cannot be refiled unless there's a new case filed. We're not talking about that necessarily, because in this case, the charges cannot be dismissed because the judge says, no, my righteousness must be appeased. So can we plea bargain?
No.
I don't
What's
see
a
that
plea
happening.
bargain? We can't cut a
You
deal?
make a deal. You make a deal when you plea bargain.
Now, why can't I cut a deal?
Why? That's
Well,
a good
a bargain is if you go to the swap meet, what do they have and what do you have?
They have the merchandise, we have the money.
Right,
there you go.
exactly, right?
Okay.
So there's a little kind of back and forth that goes forth. There's the bartering. I love me some American pickers. Yeah, they go to these old places and they find old stuff and they get to bargaining. Well, I got some money and you got an old Schwinn, original Schwinn bicycle with the gas tank on it, with its original paint. And so, okay, so I got some money and you got the bike, and then we get to bartering and bargaining, right? How come I can't bargain in this case?
Gotta have something of value.
I don't have
We don't have
anything that
enough
he
even to
wants,
get the
right?
value, though. We don't have enough. It's
What?
not sufficient.
But I don't have anything that he wants or he
Right, we don't have
needs.
nothing.
Exactly, right? I ain't got enough. I ain't got nothing. Bargaining requires mutual compromise,
Right.
right? It
We don't
means
have
that I
anything
have
that's
something
sufficient.
you want, and you got something I want, or better yet, need in this case. Do we, in this courtroom, do we have any bargaining chips?
Nope.
No,
Absolutely not. We're guilty.
Bottom line.
The final verdict is pretty much set in stone. Guilty means that you were found guilty, right?
Right.
Right.
You will receive just due sentence. However, again, as was said earlier, I got counsel. I got Christ. So my defense is that now the last thing, if you're in a courtroom, if your counsel leans over and says, "Don't worry about it, I got it," right? And all the evidence is there, and you're just like, "Oh Lord, it's coming." But then your counsel convinces you, "Don't worry about it, I got it." And the first thing he stands up when he gets a chance to defend you, and he says to the judge, "My client is guilty." Is that what you want to hear?
Not at all.
No.
That's the defense attorney? Okay.
That's like, wait. I was in court the other day. Oh, Trent, they called me, they harassed me. They said, they sent me the subpoena on a Friday. No, they reminded me of the subpoena on a Friday, but they don't put a time on it because I'm on call. So I'm waiting for a call to tell me when to come in. We've got a new district attorney that handles all parole cases. Usually we talk to the investigator who works for the attorney, but the attorney called me himself and he says, "Hey, Agent Nelson, the defendant does want to have his day in court." So he texted me and he said, "Come in at your leisure." I said, "Great." So I'm finishing up what I'm doing. 30 minutes later, they're calling me from the office and they're saying, "How come you aren't in court? They called you and told you to go to court." I said, "No, he told me at my leisure." Usually that means after lunch. So I throw everything down, I hustle up, get on down there. I got the text, so I'm not worried. There's this thing at the back of my mind is like, wow, I could be in contempt of court, right? I'm not even the one that's on trial here. And I'm the one, looking halfway bad. So the guy who handles it for parole, the liaison basically between the court, he's in the office with my office partner and they're both like, "Where are you? Where are you?" I said, hey, I've been doing this a long time. I got this text right here. Talk to that attorney. He needs to tell us exactly when he wants us there. He said, "At my leisure." Literally, that's what the text says. It says, "At your convenience." So basically, when you get here, it's going to be a while anyway. Anyway, I make it down to court after they harassed me and told me I should have been there. We get to court. The defendant comes in and he tries to fire his attorney because he don't like the outcome. So we got to clear the courtroom. He comes back in. Oh, by the way, when I get there at 10:30, they say, "We don't have a courtroom." I said, no, I rushed down here. What do you mean? Y'all was telling me they don't have a courtroom yet. So the judge who was telling folks where to go and who and what to be, go upstairs, courtroom number 48. We go upstairs to 48. It's locked. So there's another judge that's assigned. One of the court personnel come to the door. They say, oh yeah, come back at 1:30. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. Long story short, the parolee accepts finally after trying to fire his attorney because he knows they got him dead to rights. He's guilty. We're guilty. We are guilty. Your defense attorney, Christ, stands up and tells his father, our prosecutor tells the judge, also his father, that, oh, my client is guilty, but my blood will stand in his stead. But I am his go-between. I am the sacrificial lamb here. My client is guilty, but he is justified by my righteousness. That's absolutely amazing. It's absolute. So what is that called, by the way? When you are guilty, it's not charges dismissed because the charges are there, right? So when you are guilty and those charges are just set aside, what is that called?
Cool.
Presidents do this when on their last day of office.
Pardon.
Pardon.
It's a pardon, right? So it's certainly not that the charges are dismissed. It's much closer to what we would call a pardon. A pardon is an authoritative act reversing a sentence given under a guilty verdict. Once again, a pardon is the authoritative act of, in this case, the judge, reversing the sentence. Doesn't say it reverses the charges. It says it changed the sentence. It removes the sentence under the penalty that was justly given for the guilty verdict. Was Israel pardoned?
No.
Let's go to the book of Numbers. 4:11. Let's see here. There's a long one. I think I'm going to read it anyway. We got a couple minutes left.
Number 4:11.
Numbers 4, and let me see how much I actually need to read. Maybe I can chop it down because I got 4:11 through 23 here. I think we can get away with a little bit less than that. So again, just think about it in those terms, saints, because then one of the things we were talking about last week was we've got to be very careful to understand that we could do nothing. We have done nothing. And our justification was his gift. Even our acceptance, it says, it is the gift of God, the salvation that we received, even us. So when we say, again, I'm glad when I made the decision, and that's fine to say, as long as you know and understand, and you want to be careful not to convey the wrong thing, especially to those who may not know. And it really speaks to the importance of that kind of communication. Numbers 4, I may just read it all quickly. Because if we can teach it and preach it correctly, then when those things become solidified in our hearts, we're that much stronger. Our foundation is that much more sure, and we can be that much more convincing to those who may not know him. Certainly, I don't think we need. I'm gonna just have you read that, and actually, I want to make sure it's a little more in depth, so I don't want to leave that dangling there. The Israelites were not. the charges were not dropped against the Israelites, and the charges were not dropped, of course, against us. We were pardoned. We received the gift of freedom in spite of the guilty verdict. Oh, that's probably why. It's Numbers 14. That's why it didn't make sense, saints. I'm sorry. Please forgive. I said 4. So the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people spurn me? This is Moses. This is Numbers 14 and 11. And how long will they not believe in me, despite all the signs which I have performed in their midst? I will smite them with pestilence and dispossess them. I will make you into a nation greater and mightier than they. But Moses said to the Lord, then the Egyptians will hear of it for your strength, for by your strength you brought up this people from their midst. And they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land, and they will hear that of you, O Lord, are in the midst of the people. For you, O Lord, are seen eye to eye with your cloud standing over them. And you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now, if you slay this people, Moses still talking to God, then the nations who heard of your fame will say, because the Lord will not. Now, Moses, what is Moses doing?
He talking to God, and I'm listening to what you're saying. It's like, how in the world he got that kind of notion to go before God like that?
Absolutely.
Oh my
But
God.
what does it sound like? What? I'm sorry. That's why I had the 4th chapter. It's like, that ain't right. Wait a minute. No, it's 14. Moses is basically doing what? We were just in the courtroom. What is Moses doing?
Trying to bargain.
Right. He's trying to bargain.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to give them a defense, right? And he's trying to say, but basically he knows there's no way out. So he's just trying to appeal to the judge.
Right.
Say, but wait, Lord, wait. Now,
it's like
you
Abraham.
know what they're going to say about you
Mm-hmm.
if you smite this people. Let's read on at 17. But now I pray, let the power of the Lord. Oh, no, let's go back. Let's go all the way back. I can't cut it short. We started a little bit late. I'm going to take a few extra minutes. Verse 15 is where we left off. Now, if you slay this people as one man, then the nations who heard of your fame will say, because the Lord could not bring this people into the land which he promised them by oath, therefore he slaughtered them in the wilderness. 17. But now I pray, let the power of the Lord God, the Lord, it says, be great, just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he will by no means clear the guilty. Isn't that beautiful? We were just in the courtroom, right?
Yeah.
And Moses knows absolutely that, okay, I'm fighting a losing battle here. So I've got to appeal to the beauty, the character, the long suffering, the love that I know this judge has.
The high court.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I say he's the high court.
Absolutely. It says, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. We know he removed that standard, right?
Yeah, right.
Pardon, I pray, the iniquity of this people according. He's saying, what does he say? He said, I'm not asking for you to dismiss the charges. Judge, your honor, please pardon, I pray, the iniquity of this people, according to the greatness of your loving kindness, just as you also have forgiven this people from Egypt, even until now. Verse 20. So the Lord said, I have pardoned them according to your word.
Wow.
So wait a minute. Moses is a pretty good attorney, right?
Yeah.
Moses got busy right here. Moses Moses did a pretty good job. Now we know, of course, that God already had this in the plan, right?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. But he says here, so the Lord said, I have pardoned them according to your word, 21. But indeed, as I live, all the earth will be filled with the glory of the Lord. Surely all the men who have seen my glory, my signs, which I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, yet have put me to the test these 10 times.
Mm.
And have not listened to my voice. Verse 23, shall by no means see the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who spurned me see it.
Mm.
What do we know? What did he just say there when we preach and teach Old Testament? What do we know about the folks who left Egypt?
Only the ones Caleb and below were able to, they stayed in the promised land and died out. Not in the
Verse
promised land, in the
24.
desert.
Verse 24, my servant Caleb, thank you,
Oh,
because
yeah.
he has had a different spirit and has followed me fully. I'll bring into the land, which he entered, and the descendants shall take possession of it. He's saying, yes, only these select that never wavered, only the ones that were willing and ready to accept what I had already decreed and given them. But of course, we see Moses here in the courtroom pleading for the people. He wins the case, so to speak. But can you imagine winning the case? And of course, the judge says, I'll grant it, but I'll grant it to your children.
Mm-hmm.
I'll grant it to these other folks, the ones that haven't spoken ill of me, the ones who haven't trusted me, shown their distrust in me as yet. Isn't that incredible how we see this Old Testament text here and we get to exegete, explain this forensic term justification, and we see Moses in the courtroom defending the Israelites, supposedly winning the case, just using that facetiously, of course, because if Moses won and he's the defendant, or he's representing the defendant, that means the prosecutor lost, right?
Right.
Yeah, not in this case, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, because Moses asked for a pardon because he knows they're guilty.
Mm-hmm.
We need a pardon because we indeed are guilty.
All have sinned.
Exactly. One more verse. Let's go to Micah. Let's see here. Seventh chapter. And the verses. Oh, come on. Where did you go? Micah 7 and 18. There we go. 7th chapter of Micah, and the verse is 18. Who is a God like you, who pardons iniquity and passes over the rebellious act of the remnant of his possession? He does not retain his anger forever, because he delights in unchanging love. I think I want that at the end of my pardoning papers. Because can you imagine, again, seeing that God is the plaintiff? He is also the judge. It is not a jury trial, it's a court trial where the judge makes the decision. And we have to appeal to simply who he is. That's an amazing, you might say, packaging of the gospel. So think about that. Mark up your Bibles good, because that's a really good one for your witness. Because most folks, or a lot of folk that we deal with that have come from the world especially, have been guilty sitting in a courtroom. So when it comes time to speak to them, they may be able to identify with that. And when you tell them, brother, you're guilty, sister, you have no defense. You need to be pardoned. And the only way you can do that against a righteous judge and the plaintiff is to have proper counsel. Needless to say, they may ask you, oh my God, okay, who is that? Who do I ask? Because it looks like they got me dead to rights. And then, of course, we can point to the cross. We can point to the Christ. So our justification, to package it nicely enough, our justification is imputed because we are guilty and in dire need of a pardon. So thank the Lord that Christ stands in our stead, and it is his justification that's placed upon the sentencing line of our court documents. Thanks for joining us, saints, tonight. I really thank all of you, even those who got in, but maybe got in a little bit later. If you did, go ahead and listen to it after it's uploaded on Facebook. I may go ahead and continue, gentlemen, because I have a second half to that. Yeah, that's probably going to be enough. Any questions, any comments? We'll just take 5 minutes. We were supposed to, we started a little bit late. We're supposed to cut it off so that we have time for questions and answers. Does anybody have a question? Even if it's something that maybe you came in late and you have a question that you think, well, may have